Today's daf is daf Samach Hey, and we'll start with the Mishnah because that's where we got up to yesterday. The last thing that we studied was a story about somebody by the name of Mordechai, who was in charge of what's called kinim, which is one of the shofros. There are 13 shofros where they put the pledge, the money that was pledged, and one of the shofros was dedicated for a person who had ziva and had to bring shnei torim, which are uh, uh, kind of birds. And he was an expert, the Gemara says, at deciphering the kind of cryptic and ambiguous messages, because the way that the other Gizborim sort of understood these messages, these cryptic messages, was that the women have to bring a carbon for ziva, which would mean they'd have to bring both a chatos and an olah. But Mordechai was smarter than that, and he understood that they weren't suffering from ziva, and these were only bringing karbanos nidava. Chatas doesn't come b'nidava, so he understood that whatever birds they brought, there would have to be a carbon ola. Now we're getting back to the Omer and exactly how they would prepare the Omer. So that's the subject of this Mishnah. Ketzad in Osim, what would they do to bring the Omer? Shluchei Bezdin Yotzim Me'erev Yontif. So now, keep in mind that the Omer is brought on the first day of Pesach, but the preparation begins on Erev Pesach, 2 days in advance. And the purpose is that we want to minimize the amount of malacha of violation of Shabbos, so we want to of Yontif, and therefore we want to do whatever we can on Erev Yontif. So what did they do? They went out to the fields where the barley was growing, the osim osan krichos b'mechur l'karka. So what they would do is they would tie the barley into bundles, and they were still mechur l'karka, they're still attached to the ground, kedei sheyehei noach liktzar, because the Ktsiras HaOmer would have to take place the following day. So therefore, to make the process of cutting down the barley for the Omer very easy, and they could do it quickly, they would sort of tie the various barley stems into one bundle, and then all they had to do when it was time for being Mekayim the mitzvah of Ktsiras Omer, they would just cut it down. Now, the Mishnah is going to describe the public nature of the preparation of the Omer and the bringing of the Omer. And we'll soon see that the reason for that has to do with the Baitusim. Okay, we'll get to that. Kol hayoros hasmuchos l'sham miskansos l'shem. So now we're getting to the first day of Pesach, which is the day before the Omer is brought. The Omer is brought on Tet Zayin B'Nisan. We're now on Tes Vav B'Nisan, and everybody got together from all the surrounding villages to assemble and make this a public feature. Kedei niktzar bi'esek gadol, so that the following evening, which was the night going into Tet Zayin, the night that follows the first day of Pesach, when they did the actual Ktsira, and they would cut down these bundles of barley, everybody would be there, and it would be, a lot of excitement and a lot of publicity. This is reminiscent, by the way, of the Mishnayos in Bikurim about the Havas HaBikurim to the Beis HaMikdash, which was also done in pomp and ceremony with a lot of fanfare. And here there was a whole nother purpose of it. In any event, Kevan Shechshicha, now the sun sets and the stars come out. It's now the night going into Tet Zayin, so it's the time for the harvesting of the barley for the Omer. Omer lahem. So there was one person who was in charge of the Ktsira, and he would turn to the people and he would ask them, Ba Hashemesh, is it now time for, what we call Tzeisa Kolchovim, and the stars are out? Now we're ready to do the reaping of the barley. Omer Hain, and they would respond Hain. Now it's very interesting. It says Omer, which is in Lashon Yachid, but we're really referring to the entire people. So the Shita Mekubetzes wants to change the girsa, and it should read Omrim, not Omer. But it could be that when you have a group of people that are all responding together in unison, then we use the singular. Ba Shemesh, a second time he asks the same question, repeating the same question over Hain. The Mishnah was very short, but really he asked them a third time and they said Hain. Then Magal Zu, is this the right sickle that I should use to harvest the barley? Omer, and they respond Hain. Again he asks them the same question, Magal Zu, Omer Hain, and they would repeat the answer Hain. And it was a third time. Kupazu, should I put the barley after I cut it down into this basket? And Omer Hain, they would say yes, and Kupazu Omer Hain. And again, we're going to explain why this is done in such a repetitive way. It seems totally unnecessary. Now, when Shabbos came, in other words, if the 16th of Nisan coincides with Shabbos, then there would be another question that the reaper would ask the people. First, he would say, is it Shabbos? Omer lehen, Shabbos, zu. Right? So, if it, bis Shabbos means if it was Shabbos, Omer lehen, Shabbazu, is it already Shabbos? And Omer, they would say, Hain, Shabbazu, Omer Hain. Now, why is it so important for him to ask whether or not this is Shabbos? And the answer is because the Ktsiras HaOmer, the Ktsiras HaOrim for the Omer overrides the Shabbos, and therefore he wants to notify the people that we know very well that it's Shabbos, but yet, nevertheless, we override the Shabbos for the sake of Ktsiras HaOmer. So he asks them, Ektzor, if it's already Shabbos, then should I cut it down? V'heim omrim lo ktzor. Yes, you should do it. Again, Ektzor v'heim omrim lo ktzor. On every single question, there was a repetition, shalosh pa'amim hakol dover dover. So the Mishnah is only abridged and gives us twice, but really it's thrice. Heina omrim lo hein, hein, hein. 3 times they would answer yes. Kol kach lama. So why all of this fanfare and all these repetitions of the questions and the answers over and over again robotically? It seems so unusual. And the answer is Mipnei Baitusim. Now, I mentioned yesterday who the Baitusim were. We'll just very quickly review it. The students of Antignos Ish Socha, one of the early Tanoim, who taught in the Mishnah in Avos that Yehei Mishamshim Es Rabam Shalom and Aslakaber Pras. You should serve your master, the master of the universe, without any intention of receiving reward. And amongst all those students who heard this declaration, there were 2 students called Baitus and Tzadok, who came to the mistaken conclusion that what Antignos Ish Socho had in mind was that there's no future world to come. And at that point they said, you know what, it's just not worth it. And they rejected the Chachamim, and they said, you know what, we believe that the Torah is divine, but the Chachamim who want to interpret the Torah, Torah Shebal Peh, that we won't accept. And this issue of the Baitusim came to a head with regard to the Omer. because Hayu Omrim, they would say, Ein Ktsius Omer Motzai Yontif. When the Torah says Mimochras HaShabbos, it means the Sunday after Shabbos. It doesn't mean the day after the first day of Yontif. So the word Shabbos, according to the Prushim, according to those who had the tradition, dating back to our Sinai of Torah Sheba'al Peh, they interpret Mimachras HaShabbos, the word Shabbos here, is a reference to the first day of Pesach. Again, why did Torah use such an ambiguous language? We'll try to understand it as we go through the sugya. But in any event, Lafuke, in order to exclude the approach of the Baitusim, they did everything publicly, repeated everything with a great fanfare, so that the Baitusim would know that we are doing it the right way and they are doing it the wrong way. Tanu Rabbanu, we learned in the Brisa, Elaine Yomaya Delo Lis Anana Bahon. Okay, now what we're learning now is a very special anthology of Brisos, which is called Megillas Tainis. And that Megillah, which, as I said, is Tanoic literature, would list those calendar dates that have a certain element of joy and generate an Iser Tainis, and in some cases even an Iser Hesped. If they bury the dead on that day, they don't eulogize. And which are these days in which you are not permitted to fast? Why? Because these are days of rejoicement. And not only that, umiksasan, amongst these days, some of them, delol misbehon, are enjoined from eulogies, no eulogies. So first we have Meiresh Yarcha de Nisan ad Timnei Bei. For the first 8 days of the month of Nisan, Itokam Tmida. The Tamid, which is the carbon that's brought once in the morning and once in the afternoon, was established. And during these 8 days of rejoicement over the carbon Tamid, we don't even allow Hesped, to Lola Misped. Okay, now we go on to the second cluster of days, which are a little bit less level of joy, and therefore there's only an Iser Tainis, but no Iser Hesped. Mitamne Bei ad Sof Mo'ada. From the 8th day of Nisan till the end of Pesach, Itosiv Chaga Deshvuasa. This was the period of time in which the entire controversy between the Prushim and the Baitusim came to an end, and we finally won victoriously this battle about the fact that Mimachas HaShabbos, the word Shabbos refers to Pesach, and Delola Mispid. So that even the second round from the 8th day of Nisan until the end of the Chag is also enjoined from not only fasting, but also from eulogizing. Okay, so now let's go back to the first day of Nisan and try to appreciate what went on with the carbon Talmud. The first 8 days of Nisan, itokim tmida de lo mispad, because they established the carbon Talmud, as we'll see, the renegades called it Stukim would deny the Talmud, or at least one halacha of the Talmud, and there was a final, so to speak, the dust settled on this controversy during the first 8 days of Nisan. Shahayu at Stukim Omrim Yachid Misnadev Umevi Talmud. The Tzdukim came to the conclusion, based on the way they read the Torah, and they were totally focused on Torah Shebechsav, that an individual wants to voluntarily bring a carbon Talmud, he can do so. Maidrush, what led them to that conclusion? The Torah says, Es hakeves ha'echad taseh baboker, v'es hakeves ha'sheni taseh bein harbayim. Now, if you take a look at the word ta'aseh, it doesn't say ta'asu in the plural, which would have been more appropriate for a carbon sibur, which is only a carbon chova and cannot be brought as a carbon indava, but instead it says ta'asu. I'm sorry, instead of saying ta'asu, it says ta'aseh, you should do it. As if the Torah was addressing itself to the Yachid, because the Yachid took upon himself a nidava, a voluntary carbon of a keves as a carbon tamid. Maya Hadru, so what did the Chachamim respond to this challenge? Es karbani lachmi leishai tishmeru. The word tishmeru, referring to the same carbon tamid, is in the plural. Shiu kulam boim mitrumas halishka. Now, how could it be that all of Klal Yisrael would be, the Bailim would be bringing the carbon tamid? I mean, what are we going to do? The answer is that we collect the funds from the entire tzibur, which is called the machzah shekel, and then we put it into the various shofros, and that's called the Trumas al Lishka. And from those monies, we bring a carbon tzibur on behalf of the entire tzibur. Okay, now we've come to the 8th day of Nisan. Mitamnayim bevad sof mo'ada itosiv chaga deshvur delo misle mispad. And the controversy over when exactly the Omer should be brought came to a head, okay, I should say came to an end on during this period of time, from the 8th day of Nisan until the end of the Chag. Shayu by Tusim Omer Matzeres Achar Shabbos. They came to the conclusion that Mimachras HaShabbos means the day after Shabbos. That means Sunday, the first day of the week. And that's when the Omer should be brought. And now you count 7 weeks later, and you end up on Sunday, 7 weeks later. That's when Shavuos is, because the Torah says that between the day of the Omer and the day of Shavuos is 49 days, 7 weeks. The following day is Shavuos. And therefore, Shavuos by definition has to fall on a Sunday, just like the Omer has to be brought on a Sunday. Nitfal lahem Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai decided to take them on and challenge them. V'yomer lahem, he says to him, Shote minayin lachem. What led you to that conclusion, you imbeciles? They were all petrified of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. They had that respect for the great Tana of that time, except for one Zaken. Chutz mi Zaken echad shoyim mefatpeit kenegdo, who was, challenging and rebelling against Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. V'yomer, and he declared, well, I'm going to prove to you that the holiday on which we bring, or shall I say the day on which we bring the Omer, is a Sunday, because Moshe Rabbeinu of Yisrael hayav yodei atzeres yom echad. Now, let's compare Atzeres, which is Shavuos, to the other two holidays. Right? Pesach has 7 days, Sukkot has 7 days, Atzeres is only 1 day. So that means after 1 day of cessation from work, from labor, from malacha, they go right back into work. Hashem loves the people of Israel, and He wanted to give them 2 days of rest, of cessation from malacha, and therefore, Amad v'tikna achar Shabbos. Hashem established that the day of Shavuos should be the day after Shabbos, meaning on a Sunday, which according to the Tzdukim, it's always going to be on a Sunday. Kedei shu Yisrael misangim shnei yomim. Right? They should enjoy the pleasures of Yontif and the rest from work, from the the dog work market for 2 days, for 48 hours. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai responds, Korolov Mikra he said about this elderly man of the Tztukim, I would quote to you the following pasuk: "Achad asar yomei chorev derech har seir." Are you telling me that God, because of his love for the Jewish people, is going to make things easy? Well, guess what? They could have gone from Har Chorev after Kabbalah Satorah at Sinai to a place called Kadesh Barnea, which is right near Eretz Yisrael on the border, in 11 days. They were 11-day journey away from Eretz Yisrael, from Har Sinai. Today, you could make it even in less time. But in any event, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes them the long way, and it takes them 40 years to reach the land of Israel when they could have reached it in 11 days. That's your God who has love for the Jewish people and is very easy on the Jewish people. Because of that whole thing yesterday, they changed the system on me. I have no idea. Let's see what happens if I press on this button.